Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Smart Spaces event. Today's discussion will be on the topic of investment and expansion in smart spaces, taking a look at the role of technology in enhancing multifamily real estate investments. If you haven't met me before, I'm Kristen Hannick, Research Director here at Parks Associates. I lead our coverage of broadband, connectivity, IoT, and multifamily housing, designing our syndicated research projects, spearheading our custom engagements, and engaging closely with industry leaders such as yourselves. In terms of the agenda for today's event, I'm going to be opening things up with a 15-minute presentation on some of Parks Associates' research. Following this presentation will be a 1-hour panel discussion on the topic of investments in multifamily housing, moderated by Parks Associates' own President and CMO Elizabeth Parks. Joining us will be Mike Branham, Director of Multifamily Sales at Point Central, Brad Dillman, Chief Economist at RPM Living, Blake Miller, founder of Homebase AI and Chief Product Officer at Quex, recently acquired Homebase AI, Tiffany Middle, CEO of Utility Ranger, and Jackie Ware, Vice President of Operations at Pegasus Residential. Before we get started, I'd like to give a special thank you to our sponsors for helping to make this and all of our events possible. Thanks to our Platinum sponsor, Arise, the Connectivity Standards Alliance, and Rapid Response Monitoring. Our Platinum Access Solutions sponsor, Kwikset, research sponsor Nimbio, and other sponsors, ADT Multifamily, Cox Communities, Homebase, Xfinity Communities, NICE, Ventiva, Calix, Cooktop Safety, EV Passport, Blink, Aquana, 11, and LiftMaster. So yes, I mentioned before that I'm going to be presenting on some of our research in this area, particularly those findings that relate to the topic of investments in smart spaces and where we see businesses really putting their money. Over the past year or so, I've authored several reports on the topic of new technology investments in multifamily housing, drawing on our syndicated surveys of U.S. multifamily residents, as well as the many conversations we've had with industry leaders in this space. One of our recent reports, a quantified consumer report, draws on a survey we did on over 5,000 U.S. internet households, including over 2,000 MDU residents and 3,000 single-family home residents. It analyzes resident-reported technology deployments across the multifamily housing market, looking at resident interest and demand for tested solutions, as well as identifying the market for bulk and managed Wi-Fi solutions. I'm also going to be drawing on some key findings from our recently published industry report, IoT and Automation in Multifamily Housing, which takes a look at the other side of the equation, what industry leaders and multifamily property staff are seeing and planning. We've directly asked leaders in this space what drives them, what they're looking for in their solutions and partners, their deployment roadmaps, as well as their priorities over the coming years. So yes, one of the big trends we've seen emerge over the past few years, and in fact the topic of today's event, is this accelerated adoption of technology into spaces, with Internet of Things and networking technologies really leading the way. The IoT is creating new opportunities and revenue streams for many different businesses, while also enabling new efficiencies that allow businesses to optimize their workforces and reduce or eliminate the need for manual tasks. While IoT has impacted many different industries, most notably manufacturing, we see several consumer-facing industries poised for growth, including most notably multifamily housing, which has historically been slow to adopt and implement new technology, and now stands to reap considerable benefits from this leap forwards. Of course, in the multifamily housing space, as in all markets, there are limited investment dollars. Owners and operators must prioritize solutions that offer the greatest return. Where are they targeting, and where are they finding success? We're seeing increasingly that owners and operators are investing in solutions that serve multiple purposes. They are both a resident amenity as well as an operational enhancement. These are solutions that increase property attractiveness to prospective residents, making the property overall more competitive against its peers, and also increasing resident ARPU, either through amenity fees or through increased rental rates. They are also solutions that lower the total cost of ownership, either through direct means, such as lowered spending on utilities or insurance, or indirect means, such as increased employee productivity, reducing maintenance expenses, and reducing or avoiding catastrophic events such as floods or fires. We're seeing across the multifamily housing space and also several adjacent industries an emphasis on certain technology solutions. Some of the top solutions making their way through this market now include Wi-Fi networking, smart thermostats, smart locks and access control systems, AI video cameras, and water leak detectors. Let's take a closer look for a few moments at Wi-Fi networking. Wi-Fi is becoming the most common standard for enabling IoT in multifamily housing and a variety of other settings, with companies, of course, turning to other technologies in situations where Wi-Fi might not be a good fit. Wi-Fi generally offers the highest degree of reliability and performance, while also serving a direct role as a highly attractive residence amenity. Wi-Fi can be packaged and promoted to residents in a variety of ways, including standard bulk internet offerings with public Wi-Fi in certain areas of the community, fitness area, the pool, the parking lot, but are also increasingly managed community Wi-Fi that makes use of network virtualization technology to allow residents to roam seamlessly across the property while still being connected to their own private networks. To enable Wi-Fi, however, oftentimes requires an investment, deploying new access points throughout communities and the wiring to support these access points. Depending on the layout and building materials used, this can run upwards of $100,000. This investment can pay off handsomely, raising the value of properties, increasing ARPU, supporting new initiatives, including IoT and EV charging, but it does require that owners and operators conduct a careful analysis beforehand. What does the local competitive landscape for internet service look like? Will this offering be a differentiating and attractive service for residents? What are the regulations around properties selling internet in these specific areas? Are there limitations on how much you can charge? Properties must evaluate these different components before moving forward. Energy management and utility monitoring, as I mentioned, are another key area. These are proving to be both popular for residents and a cost-cutting measure for properties. Residents are able to use smart thermostats to more easily control their home's temperature, increasing their comfort and convenience. Properties are able to make use of these devices to set temperatures during resident turnover, lowering energy cost and raising the temperature to safe levels in the case of freezing weather. Smart thermostats we've seen are showing a very strong cost-benefit rationale for multifamily properties. They're also proving to be highly popular in other industries as well, with very high interest coming in from the restaurant and particularly the quick service restaurant sector. Some restaurants have reported energy bills being cut in half due to smart thermostat rollouts. Another area where we've seen a lot of interest from multifamily properties is water monitoring, informing residents about their water usage and bills, and also alerting properties if water consumption is suspiciously high, detecting water leaks before they become major problems. This is sometimes being used as a complement or even an alternative to a standard water leak detection system, which has sensors in multiple places throughout residential units. The third major area where we're seeing a lot of interest is access control and security. Access control in this sense is being used more broadly to refer to smart gating systems, building access systems, systems that control access to amenities, as well as the smart locks that control who can enter individual units. In the multifamily housing space, these are increasingly commonplace in not just luxury units, but also taking off in many different levels of housing. These solutions are replacing aging legacy technologies that depend on phone lines and call boxes, offering greater degrees of convenience and control, and also cutting down on how often a resident gets locked out of their unit. During the turnover process, these solutions allow staff to easily onboard and offboard residents from digital systems without needing to manually collect keys and fobs and rekey old locks. We also see these solutions to be of great interest in the self-storage industry, which is increasingly turning to automation to cut costs and widen operating hours. Within the area of access control and security, we're seeing a lot of increased interest in the use of AI-enabled cameras. Video security solutions making use of AI are of particular interest in luxury communities, where this technology can identify if someone is acting strangely and rapidly alert the right person if something seems wrong. One innovative use case here is cutting down on parking lot crime. A leader in this space recently told me about a deployment they've done, rolling AI cameras out to their parking lots. The cameras who were able to identify people who were acting strangely, loitering around cars that they didn't own, and notify a guard who spoke to them using the speakers built into the device, scaring off their prospective thieves. We're seeing these types of camera solutions making their way into a number of new industries, including offices and warehouses, self-storage facilities, and quick service restaurants, all with different AI model applications running behind them that enable many different use cases. Of course, with all these solutions coming into play, at the end of the day, people still need to manage them. Residents and property staff need a way to interface with these solutions, whether that's through an app or the website or some other control method. And this process needs to be easy and fluid, and better than the traditional experience, or it may well backfire on properties. Companies might not experience the benefits of their investments. In practical terms, this means having an easy onboarding process for new users, making sure that the app is easy to find and download. Does it have the right branding or co-branding? Is there a QR code that residents can scan on their welcome pamphlet? It also means avoiding fragmentation and the frustrations that fragmentation brings. One app is easier for residents and staff than many. On a similar note, one login is much easier for residents and staff than many. Getting to the point where this is possible can be challenging for owners and operators. It's easiest for companies that have taken a top-down approach, working with a select few partners and prioritizing integration from the start. For those that have organically grown their solutions, working sometimes hundreds of partners, this can be a far more complex task. But I would still say it's a worthy investment, elevating the value of these solutions and unlocking their potential. Properties, however, do need to carefully evaluate the degree of integration a prospective partner can offer, as well as how well these solutions perform with the technologies they already have in place. And with that, let me turn things over to Parks Associates President and CMO, Elizabeth Parks, for our panel discussion. We'll be back in just a few moments. Thank you all.
Welcome back. So that was a great presentation from Kristen Hannick, highlighting some of the opportunities and challenges that we see in the multifamily market based off of the research work that Parks Associates has been doing in the space for really probably over 5 years now. I'm Elizabeth Parks. I'm the president and CMO of Parks Associates and excited to welcome you to today's session. We have an amazing lineup of speakers that are going to be joining us to talk about the different business models, new revenue streams, building value through technology, the role of the enhancements in the value and the assets of these buildings, and also looking at how residents are welcoming these new amenities that are built off of connectivity, Wi-Fi, and different devices. We have an amazing lineup of speakers here joining us today, and so we're going to be taking questions from the audience. If you have any questions, please put them in the swap card Q&A or chat. We're going to start and do brief introductions from each of our panelists. They're going to tell us who they are, the company they represent, and the role that they play in the business. And then we'll get into the conversation. I've got some planned questions, but also welcome any questions from the audience. So please feel free to add those as we go. Mike, we're going to start off with you if you want to introduce yourself and Point Central as it relates to the multifamily space.
Great. Well, thanks, Elizabeth, for having me. It's good to be here. My name is Mike Branham. I'm the Director of Multifamily Sales at Point Central. We're a smart property technology solutions platform in the multifamily space. We're a wholly owned subsidiary of Alarm.com, but are focused entirely on the rental environment. I've been a part of multifamily for about 15 years and totally focused on property technology, IoT, and that's why I'm here. So thanks.
Great. Thank you for joining us. I know you've got a wealth of experience to share with our audience today. We also have Brad from RPM Living. Thanks for joining us today. Brad, tell us a little bit about yourself and your role.
Yeah, it's great to be with you. So Brad Dillman, I'm the chief economist with RPM. A chief economist role really in today's world is more of a data science kind of position related to predictive analytics and forecasting, and ultimately taking our own operational data and putting that in the context of broader market trends and building proprietary models to improve operational performance. Now, RPM is a third-party manager. We operate about 184,000 units right now, maybe about 27,000 of which are also owned by us. And I've only been with the company a few weeks, but I'm looking forward to our discussion today.
Okay, congratulations on that new role. And I love having an economist join us on these sessions, particularly to talk about some of the real estate trends that we're seeing. So thanks for being here. We also have Blake Miller with Homebase, which was also recently acquired. And so Blake, welcome back. It's always good to have you join us on these sessions.
Always good to be here with you all, and you all always put on world-class events. Thanks for having me. Homebase and now Quext, all of us coming together, we really are focused on creating a smart building solution that helps property owners maximize their revenue and NOI without having to raise their rents. We do that by bringing together everything from access control, IoT, and managed Wi-Fi solutions that help the property not only maximize revenue with things like Wi-Fi or being able to generate things through their access control, amenities through their access control, but also help them manage the building more efficiently. Things like self-guided tours, automated check-ins, and now getting into a lot more energy efficiencies, being more of a hardware company with Quext are things that we're really excited about. And so I'm excited to be here and talk about kind of the next evolution of smart buildings.
Great. So thank you for sharing that and for your time today. Tiffany, we're excited to have you join us as well. Please go ahead and share your role and a little bit more about Utility Ranger.
Hi, I'm Tiffany Mitchell. I've been in the multifamily space since 2009. My husband and I were actually owner-operators, and we switched into property technology more out of a need for what we were seeing in the market. There's a lot of technologies available to the larger players, the Greystars, the Riverstone residentials, but there's very little access to owners who have smaller portfolios under 1,000 units. So we were having trouble with our utilities. So we couldn't get anyone to service us because we were too small. So we decided to build our own platform called Utility Ranger. It's a utility billing platform that allows owners and operators to bill their residents themselves for utilities, for amenities. You have all these kind of smart technologies and amenities at the property level, but really, how do you bill for those? And this really kind of opens up the door for anyone to become their own utility billing company and bill their residents themselves.
Okay, great. And we're very happy to welcome you here and congratulations on getting a business going out, solving some of the own challenges that you all were seeing in the market. We also have Jackie joining us from Pegasus Residential. Jackie, we're very excited to have you join us. So go ahead, if you would, share a little bit more about yourself, your role, and Pegasus.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Elizabeth. I'm very excited to be here. I'm Jackie Ware, Vice President of Operations at Pegasus Residential. We are a third-party management company. We're about 44,000 units today. Those in property management knows that changes every single day. We primarily handle A and B assets. We specialize in lease-ups, value-add, renovations, and we're number 37 on the NMHC list. And that's a little bit about Pegasus, and we're looking forward to diving into this. I'm looking forward to learning from people on my panel and just extending a little bit of the knowledge that that we've experienced these last couple of years.
Great. Thank you so much for being here. So we have this amazing lineup of speakers, and we're going to start the conversation where we're all focused in, which is, where's the money and how are these business models working as we infuse technology into the building environments. And so, Jackie and Tiffany, I want to start off with both of you on this initial question and tell us a little bit about some of the things that have shifted in the past couple of years, particularly as multifamilies, residential properties are looking to add different types of technology. How have the dynamics changed? What are some of the challenging things that you all are seeing, particularly as it relates to the business model side of things? And so, Jackie, let's go ahead and see if you can start us off.
Absolutely. And I'm happy to start this off because one of our initiatives, let's say 2 years ago, where we were like, we're going to do all technology focused, really build out our tech stack. And we were very, super excited with that journey. And we wanted to become what we call pioneers. What we learned in that is that we prefer to be settlers, because with that, there were some various challenges that came along with that. One of them is, having a variety of different tech products. A lot of times they say they sync, but if it's a brand new product, they might not sync as well as you think. And there's often a lot of unknowns with products like that. There's also, for our developers, a lot of the tech decisions are made several years in advance as they start with everything. And then by the time they actually deliver, because of all the quick advancements in technology, there's something new that's already hit the marketplace, causing them to now be a little bit outdated. That's a challenge we've seen just with all the cool stuff that's coming to property management. Also, we've had a little bit of, there's always got to decide what's best on when you do a retrofit. Some of the good things you do, we've experienced, it's better to do them all at one time. If you do it on the turn, sometimes by the time you get through them all in the first couple of years, it really is now outdated and not as many people got the pure benefit of it as well. So those were some of the things that we've found.
Okay, great. So you mentioned the variety of technology for the property managers or building owners to decide what to be adding in, the pace of innovation and how this technology, different solutions are being deployed to the market, and then also these really sort of big decisions on the retrofit market and the level of investment that comes along with that if you're going to consider, trying to do everything all at once and really unify everything throughout. So great comments there. Tiffany, I know you started off saying that you started this business because of some of the challenges and just getting what you needed out of the properties that you all own and or manage. So tell us a little bit more about that, and then about some of the solution side of it, particularly this idea of unbundling some of these services and how you all view that.
Well, thank you for again, having me on. Being in the market as an owner operator, I have a unique perspective of, how does this really impact the bottom line and what does this really mean? When we started, just one example of our utilities, when we started billing our residents, where really it wasn't available to us as a smaller owner. But once we started doing it, we saw a huge amount of value increase, that we were able to leverage that additional capital from the property valuation standpoint to use that additional value to continue to buy more properties. So it became a mechanism for growth. And if you look at this kind of, part of the segment of the market that's a smaller segment, many of these tech players won't even service a smaller market because it's just not worth it to them. So then it really kind of puts this market at a disadvantage. And I'm really a firm believer in kind of the rising tide, lifts all boats, and that we need to help the smaller market grow just as fast as the big guys have been growing for years. And when you look at kind of, different parts of technology, when you're saying kind of unbundle, like price compression, right? A lot of these technologies help drive NOI, help really drive revenue. Some of these amenity fees are helping also put money back in the owner's pocket. But, I kind of think the future of multifamily is triple netting apartments. You have this price compression on the market. And what do other industries do? You look at the airline industries, they have to unbundle their baggage. You look at resorts, there's price compression. We have to unbundle their resort fees. In multifamily years ago, it used to be the amenities were what was driving the traffic to the sites. How many amenities do you have? Now you see a lot more price as the really main driver. So if one company is, just so focused on price and you're not, for example, utilities again, if you're not charging for utilities and your neighbor is, your neighbor has that same price plus utilities, where we had that price without utilities. It's too big of a gap that you can't catch up to. So when we look at kind of unbundling, the lower kind of end of the market, or the under 1,000 units and under, they need this technology just as much so they can use this to grow and be able to kind of have the same access.
Yeah, really good points on some of the smaller portfolios, and not as many units. So I'd love to get Mike for you to jump in, and then Brad, I'm also interested in some of your economist view on these business models. But Mike, tell us a little bit more on the platform side and the view of value-added services, the different amenities, and how things are working out now for building owners.
I think it's evolved over the last several years. It's funny, if you went to one of the industry events 5-6 years ago and smart apartment technology came up, or smart property solutions, the conversation was really, okay, your SaaS is X, how much rent growth can I get? And that's my ROI. And obviously it's much more sophisticated than that. So, when we're having conversations now, and this came up already a little bit, is we're looking to consolidate and really unify these technology streams. That will help reduce costs and create more efficiencies. But there's also this opportunity to mitigate risk and implement these asset protection tools. So these are all becoming a part of the kind of the financial consideration. Rent growth, like that's going to sort of move around based on market circumstances. So what I like is the industry isn't as fixed on that today. It's still an important sort of thought process. But it's not, smart tech isn't just tied to that entirely. And we've always thought that it's really if you're adopting just for the resident amenity piece, then you're really missing the bigger benefits, right? The unifying tech is one. We're also seeing, more of a centralized staffing model be a part of the conversation. And when talking to building owners and developers, that's part of the narrative now. Is they say we may not be dedicating an entire staff to this property, or it might be rotating maintenance or doing those types of things. And they come to us and say, look, we technology enables this strategy to even be a part of the conversation. So, it's really sort of marrying, the staffing model, the unification of the tech with, how an operator really wants to implement a strategy. And that's where we've seen a lot of sort of evolution in the conversation.
Well, and that platform and being able to bring it all together just plays an enormous role, but also, pretty complicated in the sense that there's a lot of different factors that are at play in that decision-making process. So before we go to Brad, maybe Mike, you can add on. Do you have any comments in regards to the decision making and the consideration of all those factors, including what you just noted with staffing? What's the top reason? I mean, what are the top things that building owners and property managers are looking at, or is it unique for each one as an individual group in how they're making decisions?
They're all sort of a fingerprint, right? Everything's a little bit different depending on their strategy, and even depending on the class of the asset. So that what we've seen though, and this is important and kind of cool, is 5 years ago it was you might be on the phone with an operator or maybe the VP of operations, and that role and title is certainly important and influential. But now we're starting to see IoT committees. I've seen VPs of smart building technology. The industry as a whole is actually putting stakeholders and titles in seats to make these considerations, because this is that rare product that sort of it touches everyone, right? It's the staff, it's the building itself, it's the residents. So it has to be done right. But you also, marketing wants to be involved, ops wants to be involved, VP of technologies or leaders in the IT space. They need to have a say, because it's their building. What goes on their doors needs to be understood. So I guess to answer your question directly, I don't think there's one driving force behind the decision. It's really, what sort of pain have they had with tech in the past, or have they not had tech and they need it because the community across the street has it now? There's just more stakeholders involved in the conversation, which is, to me, that's what needs to happen.
Okay, great. So bringing all the different players who have a stake in it together in helping that decision making. So, Brad, let's go over to you. I'd love to hear your perspective here on these business models, really the shifting equations, I guess, with CapEx and OpEx. So tell us what you think.
Yeah, so as the macro guy, right, and what I do, I build a lot of forecasting models, rent growth forecasting, tracking all the different submarkets out there, and then starting to marry this data, with our own proprietary operational data. And that's something that, of course, comes with our scale, right? The bigger we get, the more data we can collect, the more, the right solutions we roll out, the more we can capture from that to gauge things like the resident experience. I want to echo what Mike said, which is, there is obviously rent growth is always important. But it is interesting if we look at the broader macro cycle, since the Great Recession. I know this seems like we're thinking way back for a lot of folks, but the U.S. became progressively more and more underbuilt. We finally sort of turned a corner on that maybe in 2018 or so, and we're really closing this underbuilding gap. And so it had been really a free gimme from an operational perspective is something that is now is something such that one has to take out the magnifying glass and really think about where they're going to be making up certain costs. That sort of bull market in rent growth is certainly running in reverse to a degree. If we look at rent growth today being about 0% nationally, so therefore negative in real terms, it is not really providing the lift that it did in the past. And so I think as operators, we're having to look to different types of solutions to basically make up for this. And it's really interesting when we look at third-party management, and as scale grows, we can get to a point where basically as we implement certain technologies and our scale increases, that we can essentially get increasing returns to scale, whereby even top line revenue will grow, but the based on the rate that we're charging, that can actually kind of come down to this increasing return to scale.
Okay, great. And Blake, I know that you are constantly addressing some of the pain points in the sense of the network side of things in the building. Do you want to make any comments about the investments that are really becoming a necessity in the sense of making all of this stuff work, whether it's in the resident unit or whether it's around the property?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as a smart building company, you have the entire building to worry about, and trying to connect all the different things. How are you going to do that? And so the need for the network is there, that to connect all the IoT, all the different security cameras, access control, the different solutions or point solutions that are all in this building. We bring them together, but that network is expensive. And so is all the other IoT and other hardware. And as Mike and as everyone's already said on the panel here, previously all NOI or ROI on all this stuff was really looked at as, will it raise my rents? And what's kind of the gap between the SaaS and how much that rent growth could come. And we always looked early on that IoT and having smart thermostat or any of these different devices there, soon it was going to be like table stakes. You're not going to build a building, or you're not going to do a value add in a building without adding these new technologies. And so if you were relying or underwriting your rent growth based off of like a smart tech thing, that was not going to be worthwhile. And all the other promises of IoT and automating your building or centralizing your building to be able to manage it with less people all takes time and effort for your team to be able to learn how to do those things. And so utilizing that network to be able to create this new business that is multi-purpose. You don't have to have a bunch of other random hubs in the building that only do one thing, like connect a device. But this network that connects people and devices becomes a real valuable asset for the property, where not only will it help you generate NOI in the range of $40 to $50 a month, but it's also going to help you pay back and connect all those other devices. So that role that we've seen in the smart building world, to be able to utilize the network as a value-added revenue source without raising rents, is something that we've really dug in on.
Well, yeah, and everybody certainly is searching for that next round of revenue and how to help support all of the different technology that's getting infused into these buildings. Jackie, I want to go back to you and talk a little bit more about the different amenities and, what is differentiating properties. Tell us again how many properties you all are overseeing.
So we have about 44,000 units and like 150 properties is kind of what that comes down to.
Okay,
We are third party, so for us, initiatives are very specialized, right? It depends on what the client wants and the market is demanding. Is kind of how those decisions are made. But for us, when we're looking at like the tech demand, I look at it in a couple of different ways. So like the clients, they want to have ROI, what's going to put money in their pocket. They want to have protection of the assets. So you're looking at the leak detection, the energy savings, those type of items. But then tech demand also comes from the management side, right? So when we're looking at it, we're like, well, we really want to have AI things that are going to save our people time, a better solution for packages, resident billing, anything that's going to save our people time to have a more centralized effect. I know that somebody else here already mentioned. Those are the things that we're looking for. But then the resident and the prospect are wanting a different experience. So the demands for them are going to be like, the smart locks, the syncing of devices, self-guided tours, auto check-ins. Those are what the residents are going to want. So when you're looking at tech demands, I think they all come from different, viewpoints.
Well, and one of the biggest areas that we focus on and look at among many is the access control side and the doors and entrances. And so maybe you can touch on a little bit about, and Jackie, I'll stick with you here. If you can touch a little bit on, where you're seeing this piece of the building, how that's evolving.
Absolutely. So most people now are building new product. It has a form of access control. I think it becomes different when you're looking at, retrofitting it. Obviously, that's it benefits all the parties. That does, because residents it's a safety selling feature for people. Management, it makes things easier to control what's happening on the community, and obviously, it improves the asset for the client. So I think it really just depends on what budget the property has. Sometimes it's as easy as going to a fob system or going to digital locks. And then other times it's people are going to want to put in something that's going to be able to do like AI detection for safety in addition to the controlled access. So it really depends on the budget of the asset for us.
And certainly a lot of competition and choice out there, right? In terms of,
it's hard to not say vendors' names, right? So I don't want to like undo it. I have
sure.
Everybody, but like some of them are just much more expensive. But then with that, you get a lot more to offer. So I think it really depends on the individual needs of the property.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and Tiffany, you've got a lot of experience here, and I'd love to talk a little bit about this idea of the do-it-yourself version of some of these different, maybe even the technology platforms versus, outsourcing all of it, and any experiences you have with the idea of having to go in-house simply because you're a small group, and maybe that's the only way you could get it done. Or perhaps it's around the benefits of, not really needing to outsource that piece of it because it's simple enough to be able to handle in-house.
I think it really just depends on what your model is. I've been in the industry for since 2009, so I've kind of heard different types of models. From the smaller side, you have to do it yourself because there's not a lot of people who will service you. But even on the larger side, I've heard some of the really large players, probably top 10, a few of the top 10 property management companies in the country have really said that we're going to take a vertical integration strategy. instead of relying on all these vendors, how do we, either acquire technology to use it in-house, or how do we build our own in-house so that way we don't have to rely on these other vendors that are going to help really slow down the process. We want to kind of keep things more efficient and keep things scalable. So what can we really bring in-house and have control over? So I think you're kind of seeing it on the very upper echelons of the market, as well as kind of the lower market, for very different reasons. More is just availability on the lower end of the market. But I think it's going to be interesting as, technology continues to evolve, really, what's getting done in-house and what's getting done through partners.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that choice of what technology is getting added in, what's the return on the investment, what is the investment to start, and how big that should be, as well as the idea of stair stepping into more and more technology solutions is another big one. So Mike, I want to see if you can maybe comment a little bit on what's most popular right now in terms of the technology that's getting added, and maybe you can comment on the building side versus the resident side. They're like we said, there's these two sort of very different areas. So would love to hear really whatever you'd like to comment on. And then also, Brad, I'd love to hear from you on that question as well. So Mike, we'll start off with you.
Sure. When technology is deployed on site, the reality is it can be overwhelming, right? So what we kind of have this tagline: if it's not simple, it's not smart. And we really want to view this through the lens of the folks that are on site, that are in the chair of the leasing office, that are involved in resident engagement, residents, retention. So what they're asking for is, please, make sure we don't have this fragmented technology that's out there, because we don't want to manage in 6 different platforms and have 5 different logins. It's hard enough to manage a building, right? And so that's the core of what we're working on, and what we've deployed is just smart property solutions that work for property managers and their residents, right? Good for the building too. So what they're asking for is simplicity, unifying that access control and making sure that it bakes into their self-guided tour solution, that it integrates with their property management software, that it automates tasks for them. So there's this sort of menial tasks that exist today that they don't have to go back up and walk the door after a resident moves out. Can it be done automatically because the smart tech is integrated with the property management software? So those are some of the things that they're asking for, which when you ask the question, it's like, what's the next new big thing? It's really trying to just take what exists today, make sure that it's simple and that it works, right? So I think that's the fear that happens in the space. And somebody had said it in our pre-call that multifamily is typically slow to adopt. And I think it's sort of like with good reason. And I'm on the vendor side. Look, I want you all to move fast, but the reality is like, you want to be quick, but don't hurry. And what I'd say around this tech and any type of deployment is making sure that it actually works and that it's reliable. And then when it goes in, that it goes the way it's supposed to. And so we're hearing a lot of like, okay, what's your track record? Please tell me that you've done this, a number of times to ensure that when we roll this out, we don't have this snowball effect that's adverse to our operation. So that's what we hear the most of.
Yeah, the fragmentation in the market is real, and bringing it all together is really something that I think is happening in the single family home side, and of course multifamily as well. It's also happening in businesses. There's all these different services, systems, and really that unification to create an ease of use. Brad, would love to hear from you as well on what's maybe the best investment. Where is, if you're going to be choosing different technology to put into a building, is it the whole platform that has to go in, or are there certain pieces that are going to guarantee that asset has got additional value over time because of the technology that's being added?
Yeah, that's going to be pretty nuanced, of course, investment specific, an operator's own strategy. But to build on what Mike was saying, right? If we're talking about unification and the way that can come with scale, and the way that that is, very much tied to things like data flows, right? When we think about Internet of Things or any other technology we roll out that can create data, facilitate the flow of data, that opens up an entire new world about what we can do. If it's AI models or just kind of traditional machine learning models. I can't believe I'm saying that's traditional, but I guess time moves that quick. But basically, does it unify like that? Does it tie to a data warehouse ultimately? Can it be properly configured with different IDs such that we're able to measure things down to, say, the property level, through time on a monthly basis or on a daily basis in such a way that this can now start to tie to market data so that we can make the inferences we want. I think one key piece of technology in this that is overlooked sometimes is the resident app. Not so much as something that sounds cool and that it's for convenience, but this really does become a mechanism by which we can actually gauge resident satisfaction, as opposed to looking to surveys that would tell us about it. We can start to view this in real time and start to have information that would come from an app flow downstream into other models to give us the kind of insights that we want about how we're operating that property, or to even gauge, could we operate that property, say profitably based on what we're seeing across a larger portfolio and what we've seen through time in the context of market cycles to boot.
Yeah, absolutely. That real-time data, the value there. We're hearing in all the different industries that we're investigating becomes just very, very valuable, particularly when you can provide additional context and add that data set with others. So I've got some questions coming in from the audience that I want to get in, but I want to see, Blake, do you want to make any comments about what's in most demand, where investments should be made to see that return on investment? Any comments from you before we go to audience questions?
The only thing I'd add that Brad was saying is that resident app experience is so important. And I think one of the things that we've learned over the many buildings that we're in is controlling the two kind of most important access points of the building as we look at it, which is the digital and the physical. Physical being the door, digital being the Wi-Fi and the other connectivity points of IoT in the building. We have this very unique resident experience app that residents use, and also maintenance staff, other property staff use on a daily basis because they're navigating the property utilizing their app or Bob or anything like that to be able to get through the entire living experience at the property, whether it's from the front door to the gym to their unit. And so that experience inside the app we see as a kind of the next evolution of delivering services to the resident. We've had a partnership with Walmart for a number of years where we're learning how to do in-home grocery delivery. This is where residents literally can order any groceries they want and have a driver securely deliver it into their refrigerator even. For the management side, being able to manage outside vendors and the like, or package management to be able to get into the building securely. So all these different user apps in the building, obviously focused on the resident, but the different user apps of the building give us a lot of insight into how the building's performing, how the building's being used, and ultimately gives us another surface area to be able to deliver more value to the residents.
Yeah, really, really good points about the app. We're doing a lot of research work in the hospitality area, particularly in some of the higher end hotel environments or boutique hotels even, and how people check in and what happens when they go make their spa appointments, or if they want to make a dinner reservation or rent the bikes to go biking while they're on vacation. And that app plays a huge role, particularly as you get into more expensive or luxury types experiences. People expect it to be there and for it to work. So certainly can see why a big focus is there as well in the multifamily, the apartment type environment. I've got some questions from our audience, so I'm going to try to go through a few of these quickly. Here's the first one. Besides the technology platform itself, how important is the actual implementation partner who is working directly on your project or property? So anybody who wants to comment on the implementation partner, in addition, of course, to that platform play being critical.
I can.
Great. Thank you, Jackie.
Absolutely crucial. I think my favorite line of today is from Mike. If it's not simple, it's not smart. I'm going to steal that from now on. But you need them, because what I've learned is that everybody who says they integrate with another system, it integrates to some point. It's never perfect, because even with your biggest platforms, like your property management software, every property management company is set up a little bit different and based on your unit count or what you have going on. And so even though it may integrate with your software, there is always going to be a little idiosyncrasy. So that partnership is crucial. You will have hardships along the way. Sorry, my dog is with me.
That's okay. No problem at all. Great points there. So it's crucial. It's critical. It makes all the difference. Anybody else want to jump in and comment?
I can
Brad?
add in just that, the ability to meet scale is important too, right? So RPM Living being as large as we are, for us to look at who might be our vendor and something like this, we'd say, okay, well, can you hit a certain scale to make this something that we want to roll out en masse? And so that's pretty straightforward, but just how much business, how much throughput somebody else can give us, is an important consideration.
And are you seeing any labor issues in terms of the companies that can do the installation and actually getting the systems and equipment in?
Yeah, I think, anytime we're looking at something that takes bodies to do, right, it gets very unscalable very quickly. And that's a challenge. And so in addition to having, technology that actually is going to be useful, a lot of these sound cool, but, when it comes down to things at the end of the day, they're not quite as straightforward or as profitable as they might appear to be. But does the company have like the kind of HR infrastructure to actually be able to do this, to have people go out and install it, and at the scale that would be needed too? Now, larger groups like RPM Living, other groups in the industry, they tend to be geographically, very co-located, right? They're looking at a high relative market share in certain areas. So sometimes that can help. But if you're trying to roll out something within a certain time frame too, when you're talking, tens of thousands of units potentially, that's a lot.
Sure. Any other comments on that question? Yeah, Mike.
I just add to that. I think when you ask how important is it, I would say it's equally important, if not more, right? Because technology without service equals nightmare, right? So you have to make sure that there's a scalable install, service, and support model to ensure that, look, I'd like to pretend that hardware software interplay is always perfect, but something's going to happen, right? Even a resident could throw a football and break your thermostat, and somebody has to fix that. So just ensuring that service model is in place, at the scale that you need it to be, it's probably kind of question 1A or 1B in the conversation that should be asked.
Okay, great comments. I've got another question that is for Tiffany. This is specific to you and your business. Can you tell me, does Utility Ranger have a demand response function that can pull data from a smart thermostat?
So what Utility Ranger is we are not a sub-metering platform. We are a RUBS only platform. And the reason is when you are doing any kind of billing to residents, most of the regulations around the country have to do with sub-metering, and they're very complex, and you'll need a service partner who can fulfill that for you. You would not want to put a sub-metering billing in the hands of the owner just because they would not be able to remain compliant with all the regulations that are different around the country. With the RUBS only platform, the regulations, although there are some, but it's more regulation hotspots. And so we don't have a piece of it where we're pulling in any real data from sub-meters. This is more of a way of, I have utility bills, I have trash bills, I have Wi-Fi, I have network, whatever it is. It's a way of dividing that up in the most fair way when you can't necessarily afford to put the capital in place in your properties to install these sub-metering or thermostat devices.
Okay, great. And whoever asked that, if you want to talk more to Tiffany, I'm sure she'd be happy to talk with you. Here's another question from the audience about data. And then I also have a question about senior living environments. So how are mid-sized to smaller MDUs tackling the data and integration issue? Is it only the largest that are creating data lakes and getting this information in-house?
I can comment on that one.
Okay.
More and more folks are capable of the technical skill sets to build out, a data infrastructure. And while smaller groups can approach this, what I've tended to see in my career is this sort of stems out of maybe the first person who's showed up at the company that knows Excel, right? Maybe 10 years ago. And so often you get sort of an inorganic, or I guess I should call it organic, but maybe perhaps not sustainable growth pattern and how the data infrastructure is growing, and then maybe needs to get blown up and reset. Now, while one can set up a data infrastructure, if you're too small, you're really not getting a lot of insights out of that in terms of your own operating data. You can always bring in, third-party data that relates to market conditions and things like this. That can be very important, certainly, on the investment side. But until you hit a certain operational scale, and even in certain geographies, right, that you kind of need to be co-located, you're really not getting valuable information, I would argue, from the sort of data science perspective, from your own operational data. What you can do is still measure it, perhaps overanalyze some small idiosyncratic data movements, and try to correct something where you're pushing on one button and it pops out over here, and then you push it on this side and it pops out over here, and it doesn't really turn anywhere. But I think in order to really have models that are going to produce a good output, you need to start to hit a certain kind of scale. I would put that in today's environment probably at least about 80,000 units before one is going to have enough data to really build robust operational models.
Okay, great. Thanks for those comments. Anybody else want to say anything about data lakes? Who's got all the data and how they're working with it? Jackie, you have any comments on this?
I don't. I'd love to say that we have a ton of information there, but we really don't.
Some of the things that we're seeing are more at the building level, and actually kind of goes into a little bit of the demand response that you were asking Tiffany about. You have to start to collect this data at the building level, start to see how the building responds over seasons. And so using that demand response as an example, us as a smart building company, we're starting to look at how do we leverage that data to implement demand response at a building level or at a regional level. So that might be one example of how we're looking at it from a smart building perspective on, from a data perspective. We also, most of the groups that we're working with their version of a data lake is basically connecting into their PMS system and whatever is accumulated there over time.
Okay, great comments. Before we move on, does anybody else want to comment on data, collecting data, integrating it? Useful? Nothing else? Okay.
One other point I could make on that actually would be as it relates to the kind of data that will likely be increasingly collected on the resident themselves, is just that there will probably be more discussion around the regulatory infrastructure and what's being captured about residents themselves and their own behavior patterns. That's something that only very large groups have to worry about today. And even again, all of that really stems down into downstream modeling, as opposed to kind of the standard and more traditional dashboarding of just capturing data, putting it on a table. Here it is in Tableau or Excel, and I can sort the little matrix to see what comes out at the top. So it's sort of like a different level where one is at a dashboard kind of point of view. You can be at any scale to have that, but once you're really trying to build modeling off of your own operational data, predictive analytics, that's where this scale becomes more important. And within that will be nested these issues about the kind of data on the resident themselves.
Well, that's a perfect intro to a question I had, and so I'm going to go to this question before we go back to senior living. And but it was about control and maintenance, and that ability to have some predictability and proactiveness in terms of all sorts of things that are going on in the building. And so, does anybody want to make any comments about the future of maintenance and this proactive versus reactive? Maybe Mike, I don't know if you maybe want to comment on this idea here.
Sure. Smart tech's making that possible, right? I think the maintenance model used to be just sort of designed to be reactive. Something breaks and we dispatch maintenance to go fix it. And so whether it's a staffing model that's centralized and they're trying to sort of move, because maintenance labor is challenging sometimes. They try to say, okay, we'll have maintenance work a few different properties. So whether it's that type of a model or just the reality that these sensors can provide notifications. So system health on an HVAC, there's a water leak, whatever the case may be, the sensors allow for those sort of notifications to go out. So we're shifting from reactive to proactive, and I'd say even preventative. And I think that's, something that's, our maintenance teams are very, very, enthusiastic about. So while they might be sort of reluctant at first on technology going into the buildings, what we see is those shoulders kind of drop when they say, okay, so you're going to tell me when this happens. I don't find out about it after it's a big hot mess. And that's where we're going. And we're seeing a lot of enthusiasm around it.
Well, yeah, and the implications for the insurance side are really huge. I mean, we're seeing companies like State Farm jump into the game with ADT. We're seeing big partnerships with companies like Residio and USAA. And so certainly we've been watching the insurance play now for 5 to 7 years, but finally think that there's really enough devices in the market, right? They have a formula the insurance companies do with actuaries, and they have to prove out the risk mitigation that's happening. And so finally, we have enough devices that we can say, because you have a water leak detector, you're not going to have this incredible damage as a result, because you're getting that notification ahead of time. So, the insurance play, I think, is really in the very, very early stages. It's complicated in a lot of different ways. Does anybody have any comments that they might want to make about insurance before we go on to the next topic, or maintenance? No? Okay, let's move along and see if we can check out a little bit of your thinking around senior living, assisted living. Are you all working in any of these areas? That is the question. Do you think rental MDUs geared towards senior living, assisted living will adopt these technologies? And how would facility managers handle the management of the technology, either by the resident side or the manager side? So I'm not sure if anybody is doing any work in these areas.
We do. We have several communities that are senior living, and probably not more on the top end of senior living, but more active adult, and they're using the systems very much in similar ways as multifamily are starting to use it, because it's all still early going. But some of the things that we do see opportunity in senior living is a lot more workflow automation that are specific to the needs of those buildings, and also utilizing the data coming off of the IoT devices to be able to provide micro information on how that resident is living in their unit, without having to have a lot of people interaction constantly going to their unit every day to check on them, as morbid as that kind of starts to sound. But in doing that, they're able to utilize some of that data to able to give a lot more freedom and freedom of movement to the resident there. And I think the future is really bright with utilizing the technology to create a much better lifestyle for everyone, while also making it easier for the management team to provide a higher quality of care.
Well, yeah, and we certainly know consumers tell us, I think we just put out a data point saying, 70% of consumers say that they couldn't live without broadband or internet, and so that connectivity piece, the expectation of this different technology is there. And on the investor side, maybe we can just sort of round out the conversation talking a little bit about retrofit market versus the new construction, and how very, very different the thinking is that comes along with this. And so, Brad, I'm not sure if this is something that we might be able to start with you on, commenting on the value of the asset and that role of technology going in, whether you are a retrofit, a building that's already existing, or a new build.
Yeah, I guess I would begin with that by saying, broadly, the market's got a little bit of a value impairment problem going on right now, as we know what's happened in the interest rate market and kind of rent growth coming in below expectations. So there's always that sort of market context. I'd say that, from a technology perspective, new build, you've got a lot of flexibility in terms of how you want to approach it, right? You've got a clean slate in your development. When you're going into a retrofit, not only do you have the idiosyncrasies of the asset itself, its age, its physical profile, et cetera, but you've also got, how you're going to roll that out, right, in terms of its impact on the resident. But I think, and I'd said this earlier in our panel, but when you're looking at a weak market, right, the you can look at these types of, which is what we're in today, right? Where real rent growth is negative. You can look at these types of improvements as something that kind of catches you back up, as opposed to something that's really throttling into, say, like a full-on value add cycle where you're going to really be lifting rents by turning around an asset today. So I think, in summary, yeah, you've got, obviously a lot more flexibility on the new build side, but you've also got a real knife fight going on there where one's profitability is probably not quite as strong as it would have been, or at least what it was underwritten to, say a couple of years ago when the project was started. So I think there's going to be a calculus in that when it comes down to what technology solutions may have been envisioned and what is actually delivered in the new build product.
Yeah, very interesting comments, especially on the formulas and how they've changed, and even just the value of some of the pieces in the formula. It's a very different market today than 18 months ago or 36 months ago. Anybody else want to comment on the value of the asset in a retrofit versus new build and that role of technology? Blake, is that anything you want to comment on, or?
I can, yeah. I saw Jackie was coming off. I didn't know if she wanted to say something first.
Right. Go ahead, Blake. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So for us, when we're looking at it, obviously, as Brad said, new construction, you have basically leeway to do anything that you need or want. Once you get into retrofit, you kind of have to meet the asset where it's at, right? And so you have the cycle where it's at. Is it, was it going to get sold in a couple of years? What are the needs of it? Usually, right now, we're seeing a lot around like access control. We need to upgrade this access control solution. We need to put smart locks on so that we can have a more centralized management team, or we can manage this property with the people that we currently have, because we can't find any other highly skilled labor or anything like that. So utilizing the access systems in that case, and then starting to look at IoT, if there's other maybe incentives or something that they might be able to get because they're putting smart thermostats in. The other side of it for us gets into where it sits with Wi-Fi, because everyone is looking at how do I generate more revenue to kind of make up, as Brad was saying, where the rent growth might not have been happening. You can make these investments in putting in Wi-Fi infrastructure, or hopefully you have existing infrastructure that you could reutilize in that property, but then you get into any of the existing contracts that you might be in, so you have to navigate some of that. We have seen a lot of folks being able to navigate that because of some recent FCC rulings. Say recent, it's actually almost 2 years now. But those are the sorts of considerations of things that we've started to see from a smart building perspective on the new versus retrofit.
Yeah, definitely. That idea that the network as a service, we're seeing that pop up everywhere in a lot of the different work areas that we're covering. Jackie, did you want to add any final comments there?
Yeah, I just think one thing that everyone should be aware of is that I think that there's an advantage to the retrofit, at least in your market, when it comes to the ROI of a product, because typically you're doing it because you have to do it to stay competitive, right? Or you already you can better underwrite the value of it. When you're a new build and you're maybe the first with the bell and whistles or the first to do it in your market, you can kind of guesstimate what you can get on your return on that, but you don't really know because you're kind of the testing. So when you're the retrofit, you have that, initial market knowledge on what the market is demanding of the value of that tech. So that's something to consider as well.
Yeah, great comments there. Okay, we've got just a few more minutes, and so I want to see if we can close out with the final question for each of you. And I think we might have lost Tiffany, but we appreciate her time joining us today. So the final question here really is in thinking of just 3 to 6 months out, not a couple of quarters of time. What do you think is going to be happening here? There's a lot going on in the housing market. I was just listening to NPR this morning about the shortage of homes and how the high interest rates and nobody can afford to buy a home, and yet there aren't enough homes anyway, and how that all of this going on is going to impact the multifamily side. So Jackie, we'll go ahead and start off with you and see if you all can give us your thoughts as our final comments.
Absolutely. Well, I have to piggyback on Brad a lot here because, we're kind of working in the similar space of the rent softening. That's just a whole new challenge right now. I think we're forecasting and all very optimistic that in the Q3, Q4, we're going to see the rent tick come back up. And of course it will recover. And really, we're not in like a dipping end. We're just more in like a stabilizing from the crazy growth we saw from 2020. But that's kind of how we're not making any major technology changes or advancements or recommending them to our clients until we see rents start trending up and strong in their markets.
Great. Thank you for that. Mike, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, multifamily fundamentals they're still pretty strong on the supply demand side, right? So, while cost of ownership on the housing side is incredibly challenging, there's a sort of lag or this dip in development that will come back in 25, 26. So we're in a great space, and for me on the tech side, we're not going backwards, right? It's not one of those things that's we'll adopt in the future. Like we're seeing groups adopt and ask very sophisticated questions because they see real need in different pockets of their businesses, and technology is solving and unifying, kind of a key word for today, unifying their tech to make life easier. So for me personally, I'm very bullish.
Well, that's great. Certainly, consumer demand and expectations are there. So we're seeing that as well within our work. Blake, you want to make any final comments here?
Yeah, I think, a lot of what's going to happen over the next, 3-6 months, over a year, really is the refinement and kind of workflow automation of all of these tools or point solutions coming together. I think a lot of the kind of the first phase of this, of connecting all the things, connecting the smart building and people getting used to utilizing both the residents and the management side, and the vendors actually just finally getting to a little bit of product market fit, figuring out what people are looking for outside of just unlocking a door or changing a thermostat. I think the next phase of this is actually getting real value out of these solutions to help with workflow automation on the management side, but also really truly help create really cool experiences for the resident, whether it's amenity driven things or better energy management with demand response and things like that really affect the resident as much as the building it does as well. So, a lot of refinement and value creation, I think.
Okay, great. Thank you for those final comments. Brad, you want to go next?
Oh yeah, I love this part. So you might need to interrupt me and tell me to be quiet if I just keep going. But yeah, so I'll begin by saying, we think right now the U.S. is still underbuilt, call it about 640,000 units to 670,000. We hit peak underbuilt in 2018. We closed that gap with reduced immigration, and then what really became kind of a de facto housing supply stimulus in COVID that came in two forms with QE and zero interest rates. But then also the eviction moratoria, which has been radically overlooked by the industry, in my opinion. The eviction moratoria around the country, I gauged, took about 300,000 units offline nationally, gave us artificially high occupancy rates and therefore artificially high rent growth, therefore artificially high supply in the context of zero interest rates. That supply really only just now being a story, right? The weakening of rent growth that we've seen as it's slowed and now hit about zero over the last year and a half has really been this eviction moratoria unwind. And now we're going to see the story for supply. But that's occurring in a context where we still are underbuilt by, call it, 650,000 units, which is, needing to house something on the order of, call it 1.5 million people. So that's still, good fundamentals in a nutshell. With that in the models, I see right now annual rent growth bottoming in Q1 or Q2, a reasonably healthy recovery from there. One real fly in the ointment with this is immigration, where that's been running very hot over the last several years. We're looking forward to seeing population figures revised in February that might give us an indication and kind of reset these models that sort of infer just how underbuilt we are. And then the other side, of course, is going to be rate cuts, right? So the market has been pricing in rate cuts pretty consistently and sometimes increasingly so. Deutsche Bank analysts would argue that we're going to have 175 bips of cuts next year. That's going to paper over a lot of the problems that have already built up with some of these high debt expenses that have been a burden on some of the smaller operators out there. Whether or not they go, distress or consolidate in different ways beforehand, may be different. But in a nutshell, I'd say we can look to improving fundamentals certainly in the second half of next year, and certainly with forecast quotes around it. But then also incrementally better financial conditions as well. So we're sort of getting to the end of this post-COVID slowdown in my analysis.
Well, yeah, and that's great to hear that part of time is getting past us. So thanks for those comments. I love listening to you share your thoughts. And I want to thank you all for joining us. We know how valuable your time is, and we really appreciate your insights and really telling us where you think the multifamily market is headed, where the infusion of technology is changing the experience, the role of integration, and really the required investments for these major assets that the building owners and property managers are dealing with. So thank you so much for your time and for joining us today. And I look forward to seeing you hopefully in person in the near future.
Thanks, everyone.
So that was an awesome conversation. And again, want to thank you all for joining us for our last virtual session in the Smart Spaces series. I also want to highlight some of the new research that we've just released. We have a webinar actually that we'll be hosting next year talking about net zero homes. And this is been sponsored by the NICE, by NICE. And so please join us there. You can register on our website if you're interested in attending. Also, we've just put out a new white paper that has been sponsored by Cox Communities, very focused in on this topic today, investing in smart tech, practical guidance for properties. You can also download that on our website. And if you're in the market for research, I hope you'll think about Parks Associates. We have studies of property managers and building owners, and of course, our consumer research as well. In 2024, we'll continue the Smart Spaces events. We'll have our virtual series going throughout the year and our in-person conference in September 2024. And if we don't see you sooner than that, we hope that you'll end up joining us at Connection Summit at CES or Smart Energy Summit hosted at Distributech this year. Also, our 28th annual Connections Conference, our signature event, will be hosted in May, again in Dallas. We also have our virtual Connected Health Summit series and our Future of Video event that we just hosted a couple weeks ago in LA on the streaming video conference, streaming video market. So please join us at one of our many events that we host throughout the year. And again, if you're interested in research and events and marketing, speaking, sponsoring, please reach out to some of our team leaders. And we certainly appreciate your time and look forward to seeing you next time. Have a great day.